You know, a lot of discussions about movies this year have seemed to boil down to box office numbers. I mean, there's that infamous Variety tweet talking about Sinners not making enough profit, even though it very much did, given time. The past few years have had a ton of flops of both quality and turnout, with some of the biggest in history like Borderlands and Megalopolis. Then this year, the only things really comparable are Tron Ares, which no one watched because of the lead actor being, at best, a cult leader, and don't even get me started on At Worst. And a biopic about a relatively niche person who admittedly does have an interesting story to tell. But of course, they cast a lead actor who lost all goodwill with the parts of the general public that actually engage with and appreciate art in like the span of a week. Funny how that happens. But looking at the list of the top grossing movies, you can kinda tell that we really shouldn't use the amount of money things have made as a measurement for quality in like any way. I mean, all 4 Avengers movies are in the top 20, plus Black Panther and No Way Home, and I'll give you Infinity War and Endgame with how wide the MCU spread when it comes to subgenre and storytelling from the talented people creating their films. They amassed worldwide interest, even if at a casual level. I'm not one of those film purists who hates superhero media and thinks the MCU shot their dog and fucked their wife. I think it's fine to enjoy movies like this, but at the same time, you only really get to make this much money by making a movie that isn't tailor-made to attract an audience of one interest. This is why there is no horror movie in the top 50, because some people are genuinely made too scared or uncomfortable by horror movies and refuse to watch them. My point being, to make a movie that makes a ton of money, you have to find a way to make most people happy. Endgame and Infinity War were on the basis of uniting fan-favorite characters and having everyone come to watch even if they only like one of them. And the horror movies that have made the most money are the It movies. Yes, I know by franchise, The Conjuring and Alien are higher, but they have like 5 times the movies It does. And this is because, well, it is kind of entry-level horror. It's still very much a horror movie rather than another genre that has horror elements like, I don't know, Beetlejuice or Goosebumps or something, but it's also a coming-of-age teen drama using 80s nostalgia, which gives you at least several age demographics that it immediately appeals to. Now this is one of my longer tangents, but I think it's important to share because it's one of the reasons behind my fascination with today's topic. You look at the highest grossing movies of all time and you have conclusions or revivals to long-running series and cinematic universes, one of the most iconic love stories and even movies of all time that was the talk of the world when it first released, and the black sheep of this group. I'm of course talking about Nazar 2. Okay, I've never watched this movie, all I know is that it was really popular in China. I promise I will eventually, but I mean the other black sheep. Or rather, blue sheep. James Cameron's second franchise hit, Avatar. So to be fully transparent,
Sonic, let me be clear.
I hadn't seen any of these movies until about a week ago, but I've heard about them my whole life. I mean, it's kind of hard not to, considering that Avatar 1 is the highest grossing movie of all time. And no, I don't count adjustments for inflation, because then there's so many other factors to take into account, like movie ticket price, competition, accessibility in theaters, and whatever the fucking weather was that year, I don't know. And on the surface, you can kind of see elements as to why this was a hit. It's a gorgeous movie, and CG animation like this was really unheard of at the time. At least of this quality. I'm not exactly eager to compare Avatar to Final Fantasy The Spirits Within. While I wouldn't call Avatar an explicitly dystopian movie, its portrayal of Earth, but mostly America, as a resource-hungry colonialist state intent on expansion and invasion definitely wouldn't be as popular or get viewers as eager to run to the movie theaters to watch the consequences of that kind of motivation. And yet, through so much discussion of Avatar and its rich history etched into the stone walls of film, I wouldn't say it's been considered a universally beloved film as others of similar success. I've heard many a tale of how Jake Sully is an uninteresting main character, and that his white savior narrative is not exactly the most agreeable theme to attach to this movie. And while Zoe Saldana, Sam Worthington, Sigourney Weaver, and Michelle Rodriguez definitely have their fair share of fans, I don't think that's what was really drawing people in. So the question remains, how the hell did Jimmy Cameron capture the attention of the world with his silly movie about Gumball and Nicole Waterson's RTX on ancestors? But more importantly, if Avatar 1 was the most grossing movie of all time and Avatar 2 is third, where the hell was Avatar 3 gonna land? That's right folks, I'm finally talking about the movie this review is about, or at least I will soon. I tricked you all into listening to me yap about a time period that I was 3 years old in, but now, in my ripe old age, I have an understanding of the things appealing to the younguns, the whippersnappers if you will. And I don't think James Cameron is planning on making Jake Sully do the 6'7" or put Subway Surfers on the side. Interests have greatly changed, and will his continuation of this series end in another $2 billion? Well, I saw this movie opening day, so I legitimately can't answer that, but my theater was packed. Like I said, I watched the first two movies this week, and I have a lot of criticisms of the first movie. I gave it a 6 out of 10 because Jake isn't the best protagonist there, but goddamn, is it pretty. And then Way of the Water came out, and suddenly the first movie looks like shit in comparison. Like, holy hell, this is one of the best looking blockbusters of all time, and it hits so much harder. The action is better, the characters are better, the emotional moments are better. I was fully ready to give this an 8 out of 10. But there's one thing that stopped me. Or rather, one person. I gotta be honest with y'all, I don't like Spider in this movie. I think he's giving a genuinely bad performance, with a lot of his line delivery being off and just half-assed, to be honest. Not to mention, a lot of his dialogue being video game NPC lines like, "This way!" which he will repeat 3 times in one scene. "You don't have to do this," and plenty more. Plus, he just felt so much like a plot device meant to up the stakes, which sucks because I think the concept of his character works, especially with his relationship to Quaritch, since that makes him a much less one-note villain than in the first movie. So yeah, I ended up giving it a 7.5 out of 10. And then I was fully ready to go experience my first Avatar movie in cinemas. And imagine my surprise when I hear that this one is even more spider-focused. Anyway, Avatar Fire and Ash picks up right where the last one left off. I mean, they were apparently filmed at the same time, so in a way you could consider this part 2 of Way of the Water. And this is going to be a lot of introductions because of this. But obviously, we're back with our main man, Jake Sully, played by Sam Worthington, former Marine who was injured in Venezuela. Considering the first Avatar takes place in 2126, it seems James Cameron had a glimpse into the future back in 2009, and was shown the fact that Trump would lead the US to go to war for like 100 years. Almost. Yeah. That's not a good sign. Anyway, now he's blue for an amazing reason, and I'm not explaining the full lore of the 5 hours of Avatar movies we have already. I created an entire summary for my friend who I watched this movie with, because he chose not to watch the second one. But we pick back up with Jake and his remaining family, his wife and resident badass, Neytiri, played by Zoe Saldana. I'm thankful she's starring in something that actually deserves a Best Picture nominee this time around, because fuck Emilia Perez.
Boo! You stink!
They're searching for weapons to defend themselves against the military should they ever appear once more, since they need to protect the Water Tribe, and their kids, Loak, their eldest, played by Britton Dalton? Who the fuck names their kid Britton? Alright, no offense to him, but that was an interesting choice by his parents. He's reckless and headstrong, and that sometimes puts him in dangerous situations, but he means well and just wants to prove himself trustworthy to his parents. Alongside him there's Kiri, played by Sigourney Weaver, daughter of Grace from the first movie, also played by Sigourney Weaver, after her avatar was revealed to be pregnant. Then adopted by Jake and Neytiri, she's been struggling with their connection to the All-Mother, the goddess Ewa, since she keeps shutting her out, which ends in a seizure for Kiri, and still wanting to know more about the circumstances of her birth and who her father was. Plus their youngest, Tuktiri, or just Tuk to most people, played by Trinity Bliss. She is a child that I don't really have much to say about. She'll probably be an actual character in Avatar 5 or whatever when that comes out, like what Stranger Things is doing to Holly Wheeler. The final member of this family, kinda, is what Jake described as a stray cat that befriended their kids. Spider, played by Jack Champion, a human boy who was born on Pandora. His mother was killed in action, and they couldn't send him back to Earth because babies can't go in cryosleep. The Sully kids consider him part of the family, and Jake and Neytiri are fond of him, but after all the struggles they've been through, they can't look at him without seeing the humanity in him, and especially the side of his father, Miles Quaritch, played by Stephen Lang, the general who has acted as the main villain in all 3 of these movies, having a personal feud with Jake Sully, which makes sense considering he and Neytiri killed him in the first movie. But he's a Na'vi now, and trying to bring Jake in for execution. I've talked for so long, and that is just the characters, oh my god. Anyway, due to the events of the last movie, the Sully family realizes that Quaritch and the RDA are going to locate them again if they stay at the Water Tribe. And after the death of Jake and Neytiri's oldest son Nateam in the last movie, they consider moving, and think it best Spider leaves them to live with the researchers living on Pandora who were allies of Jake in the first movie. That way, he doesn't have to worry about dying every time his mask runs out of air. So they join a group of Wind Tribe traders traveling up there. But little do they know, Quaritch is back and on the hunt, and he isn't the only one they need to worry about, because on the horizon are a clan of chaotic and immensely deadly Na'vi, known only as the Ash Clan, intent on burning Pandora down due to their lack of belief in Ewa, led by Varang, an incredibly ruthless warrior who has complete control over her people, played by Una Chaplin. With these 2 tribes clashing against Jake and his allies, an all-out war is brewing bigger than anything they've seen before. Okay, first things first, this movie is gorgeous. Shocking, I know, an Avatar movie being praised for its visuals? Who'd have thunk it? But this one in particular has really wonderful lighting and areas that Jake and co go to. I loved all the scenes with the wind traders, the water scenes especially topped even the ones from the Way of the Water for me. And my god, when the Ash Clan shows up at one point and they're set up against the eclipse as a backdrop so you only see their silhouettes, it's amazing. This entry into the series definitely has the best nighttime lighting. But there was one change that felt a little jarring to me and took me a while to get used to, and it's the frame rate. Most movies are shot at 24 frames per second, and The Way of the Water was the same, but the underwater scenes were mostly shot in 48 frames instead. This created an okay balance, and it was predictable where the frame rate would change, so it wasn't an issue for me, but in Fire and Ash, most of the movie is shot in 48 frames per second. And it takes a while to get used to because of how much fluidity there is in the movement of the characters. It's like a video game cutscene, so it's a little odd to see in a big budget movie. Not that it's bad, but what is bad is the times the movie cuts back to being 24 FPS. Since this makes it look so much worse after you've spent an hour looking at the average Kojima cutscene. Now, I usually can't see frame differences. I don't care if my game is running at 30 vs 60, I cannot notice it for the life of me. So much so that I ended up playing Kiwami 2 for like a month without realizing my remote play app was capped at 30 frames per second. So the fact that I noticed something was wrong is kinda saying something. Full commit next time, Jimmy, although I don't think you need me to be the one to tell you that. Personally though, I think the strongest positive surrounding Avatar Fire and Ash is the character work. Jake Sully was not very interesting in the first movie, and he was much better in The Way of the Water, but I didn't feel like I fully connected with him. And the reason I like him so much more in this movie is because of the relationships they highlight that surround him. The best one, of course, being him and Quaritch. Yeah, I'm not kidding, these two's dynamic, where they want each other dead, but at the same time they don't really hate each other, mostly because of their connection to Spider, since he'd be devastated and absolutely hateful if one were to kill the other. But man, Quaritch is so fun in this movie. He's talking a ton of shit, he's making fun of Jake, and he's cracking easily the best jokes in the movie that got a ton of laughs out of my theater. I especially loved how his connection to Jake is highlighted through his arc in the movie, which is his relationship with Varang. Since the two connect over the damage they can cause to the Na'vi and Pandora as a whole, he and Varang go through Jake and Neytiri's arc in the first movie, but built on mutual hate and definitely a lot of freakiness. But he really works as Jake's foil. They can be seen as two sides of the same coin, and that makes their interactions so much more fun. Neytiri is also the most badass she's ever been in this movie. They gave her so many tools to kick ass, and considering the fact that she's grieving, means she's out for blood. Plus, she has many of the best emotional interactions with Kiri, Loak, and Spider. Loak and Kiri are going through their own stories and arcs trying to connect with their respective allies. Loak to the Tulkum, the whale creatures that assisted him in the final battle in the last movie, specifically the one that was fighting against the ship and killed a ton of people since it's been outcast by its group because they're pacifists. And Kiri to Awa, since she's still having seizures when she tries to commune with her. These two are both fine, and I think the performances really work for their characters. You feel Loak's desperation, especially in that one specific scene. You know the one. And Kiri gets a ton of payoff in the final battle, even though I feel like the progression of her plot was quite slow even when things started happening. But I can't help but think it's a little jarring hearing Sigourney Weaver's voice coming out of her, because Kiri is meant to be like 14 or something. And Sigourney, with all respect to you, you don't sound like a 14-year-old. Yes, there is a lore reason that is explained for why this is the case, but it's still just a little weird to hear. Alongside that, we have Spider, who is getting much more focus in this movie, and I have to say, I liked him a lot more in this movie. I think he has his moments, mainly when he's just happy and excited, and his delivery sounds much more natural, but whenever he tries to be scared or emotional, it doesn't work. And his video game NPC dialogue is still here. I wish they just did a few more takes with him, because I know Jack Champion can act. I've seen Scream 6, and yeah, he's not the best character there, but he's still doing a good job. Plus, he works much more as a plot device in this movie because he's not a secondary plot device. Avatar 1 has Unobtainium, Avatar 2 has Amrita. Spider is presented as being a resource that humanity can benefit from due to something that happens to him in the movie. Plus, the scale is just so much larger here. The first movie was very defensive, the Na'vi versus the military, but they were on their home turf and adapted to defeating them. Then the military adapted to the water and were assisted by the hunters that are harvesting resources from the whale guys, from the Tulkum. The final act of Way of the Water is trying to take down one ship, and then this time they bring fucking 50, and Neytiri herself has to destroy multiple at once. It's a great expansion of the last movie, which works a lot as a continuation of its story, which is heavily assisted by the addition of the Ash Clan. Varang is just a really memorable villain, mostly due to a great performance from Una Chaplin. I loved her immediate hatred of Neytiri. Whenever they were fighting, I was locked in because of how cool it was seeing their anger come out. But I do have a problem with their inclusion. and it's that they felt very secondary. This is Avatar: Fire and Ash. This should be the movie focusing on the Fire and Ash people. The military have been the main villains for 2 movies now. It would be fine if they took a backseat due to the Ash clan taking over for now. I personally wanted the story to be about the military trying to back off after Jake eluded capture once more, only for Quaritch to refuse and go full Darth Maul on his Obi-Wan Kenobi, being abandoned by the RDA and going completely solo until he is captured by the Fire and Ash clan. Then he's recognized from the scene where he teaches Varang how to use a gun, and becomes their personal supplier of weaponry, forming the agreement between the Ash people and the RDA, but having Varang's people still be the main villains. They felt pretty underwritten, which is probably a testament to Varang being the only named one, here only having scenes with Quaritch and not really doing much aside from their introductory scene in the final act. Hopefully we see more of them moving forward, because Varang is bad. And I love her and Quaritch, I just think it's funny as shit. There are some themes that I really appreciate surrounding this movie too. I love that it just blatantly disagrees with pacifism and is campaigning that actually you should choose violence when faced with extinction. Fight back and stop letting your enemies win. The through line in each character of grief that leads their decisions in the early parts of the story and moves them through their own arcs is also really compelling. Obviously there's a lot of nature versus nurture and found family in the debates with Jake becoming a Na'vi and Spider being their basically adopted son. Something that surprised me though is one of these movies including a nod to the fetishization of the indigenous people that colonizers are phasing out. And it's at least the second blockbuster movie this year made by a prolific director to do it. And yeah, considering the colonization themes throughout this entire trilogy, it's a fair thing to have implemented, and might get expanded later. I mean, you could argue that it's basically what Quaritch is going through, but I believe getting that Na'vi good probably just changed his mindset the same way goth girls do to white guys named Brad. I do still have some complaints about the movie, but a lot of it is just in comparison to The Way of the Water. A couple being that I think, surprisingly, the movie should have been longer.
You what?
It's like 3.5 hours, but the final battle happens and then it basically just ends. We could have at least seen a more solemn setting and set up a hopeful follow-up, or maybe shown where the villains are afterwards, but nah, cut to black. Way of the Water handled this better in my opinion. But honestly, there's so much to be said about this movie that it's hard to make a video under like 20 minutes. If I keep going, I will never end. So let us conclude. Avatar: Fire and Ash is a great entry into this bajillion-dollar series. It's no doubt going to be remembered fondly by Avatar fans. But if you're not an Avatar fan, it's not going to make you one. It works well as an expansion of the previous movies, and it sets up a lot to be explored in the future. It has some of the strongest elements in the trilogy, like the character work and the scope, and especially the visuals. But Jimmy needs to be more definite on the direction of where these movies are going, in my opinion. It introduces cool villains, but underuses them a bit, and all of this adds up to a pretty solid blockbuster that is an absolute crowd pleaser, ready to make a ton of money. I'd much rather James Cameron keep making this than whatever AI shit he wants to implement into other movies. Don't you fucking dare, Mr. Terminator. But with all that, I'm very happy to give Avatar: Fire and Ash a 7.5? I gave Way of the Water a 7.5, but I like that one more. I'll say 7.5, but I still like Way of the Water more, if that makes sense. And if you want some hot blue people to enter your life soon, I'd recommend you subscribe. The YouTube algorithm is mean to smaller creators like me, and only about 0.3% of my viewers are subscribed. So, may as well join the minority. This might end up being my last upload of the year because of the holidays, but the day this gets uploaded, I will be watching the new SpongeBob movie. And with that, Welcome to Derry and Pluribus finally coming out / concluding, I do have options. Let me know in the comments if you, for some reason, care enough for me to talk about any of these. Otherwise, my next video will probably be out January 1st. Thank you all for the support. 2025 has been an amazing year for me, and considering it's the first year of this channel and I've already come so far, I'm quite proud of what I've done, and glad it's been mostly well received. I'm not going anywhere. I'll just be seeing you all in the next one. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
To